This is Will Campbell and Garrison Guzzo interviewing Roger Gill for the Nauset Witness to War project. So, first question, why Cape Cod? Why are you living here now?
I was born here.
Born here?
Yep.
Alright, great. And what was that like growing up on Cape Cod back in that time?
It was wonderful. The Cape wasn't that much different. There's just more people here and more buildings now. I think the attitudes and it's not as easy for young people here today. I think we had a lot more fun and there was a lot less temptation, and we just made do with the natural resources that we had.
Where'd you go to high school?
At Nauset.
Nice. What'd you like to do growing up?
I liked playing with cars. My dad owned a garage that my brother and I now own, and we always had an old car or two in the backyard. I enjoyed taking them apart and trying to put them back together. I also enjoyed collecting stamps. And I guess that was it. Yeah.
And so why the military? How'd you end up enlisting?
I got drafted. I didn't enlist. They had to come catch me. I didn't sign up for the draft. I wasn't a protester or anything like that. I just never signed up. And one day I got this letter from the draft board and told me that I had to go sign up. I was about 20 years old. And about 3 months later I got a notice saying that my friends and neighbors wanted me to go serve my country. And so off I went to start the adventure.
And what'd you think of the war?
The war was, at the time, I think it was, I believed in this domino effect theory that the politicians were pushing. And I just felt it was, as an American, it was part of my duty to go and do my part.
Could you explain that domino effect thing real quick?
Yeah, the communists were moving from China into the other parts of Southeast Asia, and they were saying, if South Vietnam falls, then goes Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, and the whole world was going to become communist if we didn't go and stop it. We went, and I think we did stop it. We won all the battles, but we didn't win the war as such. But I think we did win in that the South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese got together. It's a communist nation, but they do have some free enterprise, and I think that a lot of American ways rubbed off on them while we were there. And I think that we did win indirectly in that case.
Could you explain what you needed to do to prepare for the war?
I didn't need to do much of anything. I was a soldier, and I went where I was told, and I was married. We had one child, and my wife had twins on the way. And I could have got a deferment until the twins were born, but we decided I'd rather be back early when they're little rather than hang around and wait. So my wife was going to go to finish up college in Westfield, Massachusetts, Westfield State, and she lived out there, and I went off to Vietnam. There was not a lot of preparation. We just did what we had to do.
Can you describe your first few months in the military?
Yeah, I was, when I got drafted, I was involved in a program that the Department of Defense had organized. It was called Train and Retain, and their whole theory was that they were going to replace complete division-sized units in Vietnam. They were going to train all these guys together and send one whole unit to replace another whole unit. Nice theory, but in fact they kind of forgot that people get killed and people get wounded and people transfer in and out for other reasons. By the time the unit had done their year over there were probably less than 50% of the original people, so the whole concept didn't work. but it was great for us. The folks that I trained with in the 4th Division at Fort Lewis, Washington, are still a lot of good friends there and a lot of good memories. I didn't go to Vietnam with them, I went later, but it was, your first unit in the military is always one of the fondest memories, I think.
And when you went to Vietnam, where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Nha Trang. It's in the Tu Quoc area, about halfway up the coast. It was an old French resort. I befriended this Special Forces Master Sergeant on the way to Vietnam, and we landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base down near Saigon, and then we took a smaller plane to Nha Trang, and we got to Nha Trang. The sergeant had a Jeep waiting for him, and he said, "Come on, Captain," he said, "I'll give you a ride to the headquarters," which turned out to be a very fortunate ride because I was the first one in that morning, and I went to sign in and reported to this colonel that was on duty, and he says, "Captain, I've got 3 jobs available. The first is in an air-conditioned building out back. Do you want to hear about the other 2? I said, "No, thank you, sir." I'll take it. I was very fortunate.
So what was a typical day like there in the military?
In Vietnam, we worked 12 hours on and 12 hours off, 7 days a week. I worked the night shift. I worked from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. We worked in a major headquarters. My job was the assistant G3 Air, which involved clearing targets for naval gunfire, artillery, aircraft, Air Force aircraft, Navy aircraft, and we had to approve and clear all the targets before they were fired on in the whole of the Tu Quoc area. And then the night shifts were usually quite boring. We gave a briefing in the morning to the whole headquarters staff. There were 2 or 3, there was a 3-star general and a couple of 1-stars, and all their staff, we gave the morning briefing what happened the night before, and to bring everyone up to date that came in for the morning shift. And we got off work and we'd go to the beach and drink a couple of beers and then go home and go to bed and wake up, and it would happen all over again. That's pretty much the way every day went. About 2 or 3 times a month I would try to get out into the field to visit the people that we were talking to out there, the guys that were calling for help, calling for air support and artillery support, just to get a feel of who you're talking with and to put a face on a name. It was, I like to do that because it was, it just put a little more personal spin on the whole situation, and you kind of get to know who you could say was really needed what they were asking for and who didn't need what they were asking for.
Can you describe some of the relationships you made in the military?
Yeah, they were very tight, very close. When in the military, when you train, that your life depends on a bunch of other people, and their life depends on lives depend on you. You become very close with people who might not be have a lot of the same interests or a lot of the same background. You get to meet a very diverse group of people, but you all come together because your lives depend on it at one time or another. Even if you're not in combat, you still have a much different relationship than most friendships. It's and they only last for maybe a month, maybe 6 months, maybe a year or 2, but they're the kind of relationships that when you visit these people 30 or 40 years later, you're as close as you were the day that you were serving together.
Can you give an example of one of those relationships?
Yeah, I just recently completed a trip out to Michigan. My wife and I went out there for a couple of weeks, and I visited a person that I served with at Fort Hood, Texas, back in 1967, and I served with him again in Fort Sill, Oklahoma in 1971. The last time I'd seen him was 1973. He came in to visit me, and I hadn't seen him since 1973, and I located him through Facebook, and I knew I was going out that way, and got in touch with him, and we had to spend a couple of days together, and it was just like we'd never been apart. It was just telling stories and reminiscing and putting the pieces back together of things that happened. And I have probably 15 to 20 other good friends that I have relationships like that. We have one group from that I went to officer candidate school with. We have a reunion at Fort Sill every year, and there's a group of about 10 or 15 of us that go consistently. Sometimes we'll get up to 20 members from our class. The whole reunion consists of about 200 people. There's another group that I go to reunions every year with, and we go to Crosby, Texas, which is the home of our first sergeant. And it's the first group that I was with at Fort Lewis, Washington. And they were the ones that went to Vietnam. I'd say I did not go with them, I went later. But they saw some very bad action over there, and the first sergeant won the Medal of Honor. Probably shouldn't say won, he was awarded it for his acts and the acts of the people that were with him. And this is a very, very tight-knit group, and we get together, say, once a year in Crosby on the anniversary of the battle and award a scholarship to the ROTC student of the year at the local high school in Crosby, Texas. And so once again, we hadn't seen each other probably for 35 or 40 years before we started getting together, and it was just like we'd never been apart. It's just a good feeling.
Can you describe your most vivid memory from serving in the military?
Yeah, I think one of the most vivid things, I was in the reserves at the time, and I was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was doing a 2-week tour with the 101st Airborne Division, and we were out in the field firing 155 howitzers, and I was standing beside a gun, and the gun fired, and the round exploded just as it went out the tube. No one was injured seriously, thank God. But it was a very memorable thing. I still have a piece of the shrapnel. I didn't get hit with it, but it landed by my foot. I wish I'd brought that today to show you. But that was something I'll never forget.
What was one of the harder decisions you had to make when serving in the military?
Oh, there's a lot of tough decisions. As a leader, as an officer, many times you have to do things that you don't think are quite right, and you do it for the good of the unit or the good of to complete the mission. I was always one that put the welfare of my men ahead of most everything in most all cases. I can't think of any specific decision that was really tough, but every day you were making decisions that affected people's lives, and especially the guys in combat. Not so much in peacetime. You're just making decisions that are unpopular. They're not life-threatening decisions. But I can't recall any things that I really had a problem with.
Can you just tell maybe one of those decisions, maybe?
Yeah, well, I had actually it was a decision about myself. I was in Vietnam. I was in a very good, safe place, and it was. I had been there for about 9 months, and I hadn't been on a R&R, which is like a week off from Vietnam. They send you to Hawaii or Australia or Malaysia or somewhere, and I wasn't going to take that week because I see, there's guys out there in the field that are a lot worse off than I am. I'm living in a pretty good place. I'm kind of like in a resort area anyway, and I don't need the time off, but then I decided that I would do it, and I went to Australia, and that was probably a good decision on my part because I would never get there otherwise. It's just too long a trip. I had a great week there, and I enjoyed it, and met a lot of nice people, and it was a decision that I was glad that I made.
When I say the word Vietnam, what comes to mind?
I think people, the people of Vietnam are probably one of the most important things. They're a wonderful people. I got to meet a lot of them. We worked with a Vietnamese unit there, and we had a lot of local Vietnamese working in the compound we were in. They were just wonderful people, and the life that they have lived. They've been fighting battles for years. They've been at war. And the fact that they've survived this and come through it, the people there are just an amazing group of people, I think.
Can you describe one of the interactions you've had with the people there?
I think it was just on a daily interaction with we had these women. They were older women that were cleaned the quarters that we lived in, and they did our laundry, and they were just very appreciative of what we did for them, and they were very glad to have a job as minimal as the pay was, but they were always seemed very happy, and they were glad to do whatever they could to help us, and they were thankful that we were there helping them. But I think she was probably the person that I had the most interaction with on a daily basis.
Can you describe one of your happiest moments during the war?
Yeah, the day I left to come home. I stayed an extra month in Vietnam. I was attending night school. I didn't have my college degree, and I'd had 1 year of college before I went in the Army, and I'd been working on night courses to get a degree. And the University of Maryland had a program in Vietnam. They ran late afternoon, early evenings so I was taking courses, and I stayed an extra month to complete another course so I could try to get a degree as quick as I could, so that hopefully I could. At that point, I decided to make the Army a career and stay in the Army, and you had to have a college degree to even think about staying in as an officer. But I say the happiest day was the day that I left there.
And what was probably one of the sadder moments or darker moments in the war?
Oh, I think the worst thing was when we couldn't get help for the guys that needed it out in the field. The men that were in battle out there were calling for air support or naval gunfire, and all the assets are either tied up or not available for some other reason. They had a tendency to be a little stingy with some of their assets sometimes, and I got in some verbal shouting matches with people occasionally about not providing support that I knew was available. And who are we to judge what's going on out in the field? I had many friends that had been killed before that, and I had the guys that I had trained with at Fort Lewis, and I knew what they had been through and the battles they'd been through, and how much the artillery and tacky air and naval gunfire was dependent on their success and keeping them alive. And I think that was the hardest thing, was saying, no, you can't have this, to the guys that needed support through circumstances that were beyond my control.
And how did you feel when the Vietnam War ended?
Oh, I was kind of glad, but I was also a little concerned, because I knew that there wasn't a very big chance of my staying on active duty as an officer. If the war was over, the force was going to be cut, in which I was cut in 1973. I came home, and I stayed in the National Guard and the Reserves for another 20 years. But I think that the war being over was, I was glad it was over for some reasons, and not glad for personal reasons.
And how did you feel coming home?
I felt great. I was, I, initially it was a little depressing when we landed at San Francisco. There was no one there to greet us, or we were all pretty much just on our own to find our way home. But I was glad to be going home to see the kids for the first time, and glad to be back with my wife and family. And I was looking forward to a new assignment at Fort Sill, so I knew I was going to be around for a little while longer.
You said you were there alone at the airport when you came home, and how were you received coming home in general?
It was rather nondescript. We just went through just like a normal. There was no fanfare. There was no shouting. There were no protesters. But there was no one there waving a flag, congratulating us and thanking us either. It was just kind of a lonely time, I think.
What was the first thing you wanted to do when you came home?
I guess just see my family, and be with them and spend time with them. That was the most important thing at the time.
And what experiences has being a veteran brought to you?
It's brought a lot of good experience. I think it's through veterans organizations such as the Legion and the VFW, the AMVETS. It's given me the opportunity to help other veterans, to help a lot of these young kids that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, the whole Middle East. And I think the Vietnam vets in general have put a lot into helping these young people because of the way we were received, or non-received, I guess. It's a good opportunity to keep giving and keep serving.
You're saying you keep giving back and helping other returning veterans. Can you tell us maybe one time or give an example of how you've helped out?
Yeah, we have. I belong to the VFW post in Brewster, and we have some young guys that come in there, and just sitting around and talking with them and explaining to them some of the benefits that they're eligible for. The education, money to help fund things, services that are available through the post, and just the general network of veterans where you can go and talk with other veterans. A lot of guys have a lot of problems with coming back, whether they saw combat or whether they didn't, or they have guilt feelings. I think the most important thing is to be able to talk with these people and to listen to their problems and show them some understanding and try to guide them to get some assistance where they need it to help them cope with the stresses of combat or just service and being away in general.
If someone came to you now saying they want to join the military, what would you say to them?
Do it. My grandson just left last month, and it's a great thing. My son went in the military. He did 2 years in the military. The military is a great opportunity for a young person today. There's a lot of just education. You can learn a trade. You meet people from different areas. Just the socialization process that's involved, and the learning how to perform as part of a team. I think those are important values that we can all learn something from. And the military is not for everyone, but it's only 2 or 3 years, and it's a very short time in the term of your lifetime, and it gives you some experiences and opportunities that you would never had otherwise.
What do you think you would have done if you didn't join the military?
I'm doing what I'm doing today. I would have stayed at Father's garage, and I'd be there and be running the garage like I am today. But there's a lot of things I wouldn't have if I hadn't joined the military. I wouldn't have a college education. I wouldn't have a pension. I wouldn't have health care that's free. I think that I would be in the same place I am today, but I wouldn't be anywhere near as well off as I am today.
Could you go into a bit more detail on how your life has changed after the war?
Well, I don't. My life didn't change a whole lot, other than the fact that once the war was over and I got out of the military, I came back to work at the garage. And there's no telling, if I had stayed on active duty for 20 years, there's really no telling what would have happened. If I would have, I still might have retired in time to come back and go back to work at the garage, or I don't know what would have happened. But I think that the question was the changes.
Yeah, changes. Like,
I don't know.
are you still in contact with any friends from the military? I know
Oh, yeah.
Touched on this a bit earlier.
A bunch of them.
Yeah.
I probably interact. There's some of them that I interact with weekly, some monthly, some a period of 6 months or a year. But I probably have at least, I would say there's probably 30 good friends that I interact with frequently within a year's time. And we're all, everyone's in different places doing different things, and it's just a lot of them, the guys are getting to the point where they're retiring now, they're thinking about retiring, and they've got more free time to travel around. I meet a lot of guys in different places traveling, but it's as I said before, it's just a different kind of friendship and relationship from people that have served in the military together. And it's different between those that have served in the same unit and those that have just served but not in the same unit. There's just a different level of association, I think, there.
What do you like to do now in your free time?
Nothing. I go to Florida for the winter. I spend about 5 months there and 7 months here, and I enjoy laying in the hammock, and I do a lot of reading. I do a little gardening, grow some plants, and then when I'm here, I work. I still work at the garage when I'm here, and I enjoy coming back in the summer to seeing people, and I enjoy pumping gas and just talking with people and catching up with what's going on around town. In the past, I've done a lot of activity with local government activities, school committees, town committees for beach studies and golf course studies, and I do a lot of volunteering with the church in Florida. When I'm down there, we have a lot of events helping the homeless. We have an after-school program. I just enjoy being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it.
What do you run into today that reminds you of your time in Vietnam and can bring up memories?
The aftermath of the hurricane in Florida. I recently went down after Hurricane Irma, and when I first hit the area where the hurricane was, it was the smell, the stink of the debris and the garbage and everything that was there. That the first thing I thought of was this. Vietnam was the same way. It's just a very, in most of the areas, it's just when I was there was not a lot of sewage, and the sewage was raw sewage running down the side of the street, and the smell it was the same way after the hurricane down there. There was just so much trash and garbage and seaweed and stuff piled up there. And it's just in the heat, and it stunk. That was.
If Vietnam wasn't a draft and you could go back in time and enlist or not enlist, what choice do you think you would make? And why?
I probably wouldn't have enlisted. It wasn't a priority. It wasn't something I thought about. I'm very lucky that I got drafted. It changed my life significantly and gave me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had. But I don't think I would have gone and joined the military at the time.
Do you have any final advice that you'd like to share with us two or our class in general?
Yeah, I think the important thing is to be hate free. The world today, there's so much hate going on out there, and everyone is so negative. Um, I'm not a fan of our president, but he's our president, and we need to focus our energies on doing things good in the local community. You know, forget about this national stuff. This doesn't mean too much. We've survived other presidents that weren't very good. The country's still here. We're still great. But people need to focus on their local communities and doing good things, helping people that need help. You know, help the elderly people, help younger people that need childcare. You know, you see something wrong, correct it or do something about it. Don't just sit there and look at it and say, "Hey, that's horrible," and then write a note on social media how horrible something is. You know, people need to focus on positive things, and just kind of the negative things they'll disappear, most of them. But just to be positive and be helpful and be respectful. I think that's the key to survival and the key to bringing in youth into the leadership of the country. They need to just come in and realize that they're there to help people and do what you can for other people, and your life will take care of itself, I think.
Alrighty. Thank you for sitting down with us. We're just about out of time. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Great.